Welcome to Maritime Health and Performance Chat, where we talk with individuals involved in health and sport, from academics to athletes. So to preface today's segment, we have an amazing guest. My tone of voice might not reflect that. I just came back from my last workout of this phase, everything to failure, only puked a little bit. So I've got my coffee. I'm trying to revamp up, but in my mind the excitement's there. It just might not come across as well in my tone. So let's get right into it. Today's guest is a world medal athlete, Olympic hopeful, and also certified pretty boy, Alex Scott. So Alex, everyone wants to hear about your background, so let's get right into it.
Well, thank you very much, Matt, for having me on. You and I go way back because we used to do judo together. I guess that's where I'll start, because that's where my sort of love for sport began is with judo. I am a paddling athlete. I'm a sprint kayak athlete, but I had always had done judo first. So when I was 8 or so, I was a full-time judo athlete, and then in the summers when judo let out, I would paddle. So I did both for a long, long time, and it was through judo that I really developed a love for sport. We got to meet a lot of really cool characters in judo, a lot of Olympians, Canadian Olympians like Keith Morgan and Nick Tritton, folks like that. And I was blown away by these people, and I thought that was just so cool. And ultimately, my judo career led me to the 2011 Halifax, Canada Winter Games. When I was about 16, when I competed at those. Unfortunately, after that time, I sort of felt like my judo career was kind of winding down. In order to kind of make the next moves, I'd have to move away from home, go to Montreal. And at that same time, I was still paddling, and I was doing quite well in paddling. So I was a bit unsure as to where my judo career would lead me at that time. And then about a year later was the 2012 Olympic Summer Games. And it was kind of interesting because at those Olympic Games, there was a clubmate of mine, Mark DeYoung, who was competing at those games. And I just remember the entire club. We had a huge event at the clubhouse, and we watched all the races, and we watched Mark compete. And I was absolutely, I was so fascinated by that. And I just felt that it felt really possible. I love sports so much, and all of a sudden I'm seeing someone in my own community competing at the Olympics. And it just felt very potentially attainable to me that there was a pathway forward here to maybe one day go to the Olympics myself. And so I kind of felt with my judo career winding down, but my paddling career sort of spinning up, I decided to commit to paddling full time. And that's when I made the transition. It was the next year in 2013 that I made the junior worlds team in paddling. And then in 2014, I was on the junior national team, training with them. 2015, I joined the Canadian senior national team. And of course, my goal at that time was to make the 2016 Olympic Games. Of course, I was still very new to the sport. And at the time, I was trying to make the Olympics in a crew boat, in the K2, in fact. And in our sport, a K2 just means a kayak for two people. A K1 is a kayak for one person. So I was trying to make the Olympics in the K2. Unfortunately, the coaches ended up thinking, they thought I was too new to the sport still. I mean, I was the youngest in my training group by about 5 years. And most of the guys are about 8 or 10 years older than me. So they just felt that I didn't really have the experience in order to really be able to race at the Olympic level in a crew boat. And so ultimately I didn't compete at the Olympic team trials in crew boats, but I did compete in the K1, and I placed second to the, then world champion Mark, and ultimately became an alternate for Mark at those 2016 Olympic Games, but it meant I didn't get to go or to compete at them. And I was pretty disappointed by this because I felt that I was, I demonstrated that I was fast enough to be on that team, because I had beaten all the guys who would have went in the crew boats. The coaches just felt that I didn't have the experience necessary to race in the crew boats. So with that in mind, I decided with my coach that I would change my training program entirely to get ready for the 2020 games, because if the idea was that I didn't have the experience or the technical ability to paddle and crew boat, I wanted to fix that. So instead of doing the normal sprint program that I had been doing, I decided to do a longer distance program, a high volume program. My thinking was that if I take more strokes, I will be able to work on my technique more because I'll just be doing more of it. So I did that for a few years, and I did that for a few years. In 2017, I saw huge improvements in my technical ability. I didn't make the crew boat that I was trying to that season, the K4 500. But last minute, a teammate of mine got sick at the under 23 World Championships, and they needed me to substitute into the boat. And it was literally last minute. I woke up the morning of that race to my coach, like literally touching me, like nudging me to get up out of bed, and, startled. He was like, you have to come to the course. We need you to fill in. It was like that immediate. And so, I went to the course, I jumped in the boat last minute, and we raced. Heat, pretty good. Semi, pretty good again, pretty damn good. And then final, we ended up finishing fourth, and we were 1/100th of a second off of the podium and 1/10th of a second off of the gold medal. So doing that after failing to make any crew boats in 2016 really demonstrated to me that what I was onto was working, that this high volume program, taking more strokes, was really helping me develop better technique, better crew boat knowledge and experience.
That's a really interesting point, because where you were saying a lot of your teammates were doing more sprint type programming. You see it a lot on say like the Instagram and stuff, like the fitness gurus. They're putting out these workouts, and it's like, you want to look like me, you got to train exactly like me. But from everywhere from the general population up to you guys in high performance athletics, everyone is so individual that program A for one person might not work for the other, right? And it's kind of part of the the multidiscipline team looking after those, especially the high performance groups, to kind of indicate, and especially in that case, kind of your coaches on the technical tactical side, and probably your strength and conditioning professionals in the weight room side, and the conditioning side of things, kind of making those decisions, looking out for the athlete's best interest. But training at any level is extremely specific. I know you have a lot more to go into. I just want to stop you for a sec, because there was something you mentioned, a couple things you mentioned actually, that really stuck out for me. I want to start with the Canada Games one. So kind of having that, you said after the Canada Games you felt a little almost in limbo, right? Like your judo career was kind of hanging there, like it was almost like a transition phase. And one thing I see, and I especially see it because the sports I was involved in was judo and wrestling, but a lot of other sports I know see this, that there's almost like a Canada Games cycle where the year immediately after the Canada Games, numbers are at an all-time low, and then as you approach, more people come out of the woodwork, say, I might give this give a kick at the can. And then you get the Canada Games, and we both saw this, that there were several people who even medaled or came top 5 on our team, that immediately after Canada Games, whether through parents, teammates, coaches, whatever, built up that Canada Games so much in their head that it was such a weight on them that when it finished, it almost felt like they had probably a career's worth of work after that. And you have these people that have a lot of potential that and this isn't to say that every person who's a good athlete has to go on to, compete at the high performance levels, but there were so many people that really could have, and a part of me thinks almost should have continued, but they just completely removed themselves from the sports, even to a recreational level, because they were so burnt out after that Canada Games, because it's so built up by everyone around them. There's so much hype to it. I mean, you and I both, we had interviews and everything, especially where it was in our hometown. All our families were there. I remember, and you and I were both at the youngest kind of you could be to make that team. It was a lot of pressure for a 14, 15-year-old.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were, 16 at the time?
Oh, no, it was 2011. So I still would have been, I think, 15.
Right. Okay. I think, so we would have been 15, 16. I guess you're right. Yeah. I also remember being quite underweight too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I was, we a few less bodies in the sport, right? And just for, really because of population. it's funny because, to make a more full team, to give us the best chance to kind of have an overall standing, which people might not realize, but in some of these even individual sports, the team standings are extremely important because that kind of dictates funding for the next cycle.
Yeah.
It dictates where you are placed, where your province is placed in the pool. So opportunities kind of have a better draw, to face lower ranked athletes in the earlier rounds. So I mean, placement actually does bear some weight. And one thing, if anyone is listening to this that is involved in the Canada Games program, I would love to say is it's smaller than an Olympic Games, it's smaller than a Pan Am Games, it's smaller than a Commonwealth Games, right? But it's a multi-sport games. There's a lot of fanfare, a lot of hype. Like, preach to these athletes that this is a stepping stone, right? If a lot of the times Canada Games is smaller than a national championship, right? There's less people. You have, for the sport of judo, you have less fights.
For sure. I mean, it mirrors the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games, it's the same thing. It's much smaller per sport. It's much smaller than the World Championships.
Yeah.
Way fewer people will attend and compete in any given sport than at that sport's World Championships, but it is still what everyone's 4-year cycle, training cycle is all based on, and so it'll be the highest level of competition. It'll just be much smaller.
Yeah, so I would love there to be like a transition in the Canada Games mentality from like this is the pinnacle of your athletic career at 15, 16, or 17 to this is a great opportunity to expose you to what you might see as you progress when you in the junior. So for most sports it's kind of 18 and up, and the seniors, so like 20 to 23 and up levels, right? Like it's a great exposure, so it's not a big shock when you reach higher levels like where you are now. But I think kind of the weight of it needs to be brought back a bit, and kind of a bit of perspective needs to be taken. I loved how you kind of talked about when you got that opportunity to compete in, I believe, 2017 in that crew boat when you guys, so I had a good friend of mine, my boss right now, head strength conditioning coach at St. Mary's University, Eric Richard, on this as well. And one of the things he said, which was so good, preparation plus opportunity equals success. You were the alternate, but you did not dial back your training. You were like, I'm the alternate. Okay. Next time around, this is my spot. You trained still, you were ready, and you were prepared. So when that opportunity literally came knocking in the form of your coach that morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that, because that's exactly that was exactly my mindset, and in fact, almost exactly the sort of the saying that I was going on or off of, right? I mean, it's you have to prepare yourself for what will inevitably come your way. What will the opportunity that presents itself? You don't know what that will be necessarily until it happens. But at the same time, you have to do your best to try and prepare for whatever it does come up. So that was the goal in 2017. Is the majority of this sport is crew boat. There's only for me as a sprinter, there's only one event in the singles that I could potentially compete for, which is the K1 200 meter. I'm not a 1,000 meter guy. So it limits you if you do not reach beyond that and try to find some way to obtain crew boat skills so that you can kind of compete in multiple events.
Awesome. I mean, now that we kind of naturally came back around to that 2017, I'd love for you to continue on about your path to where you were today.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, 2017 was awesome because I think, it showed that I was onto something. And so I continued that work of high volume program. But keeping in mind that by the time that the 2020 Olympics rolls around, I do need to be able to switch back and do some more sprint specific stuff in order to be able to qualify for that. So I kept at it for 2018 and then partly of 2019 as well, because 2019 is the Olympic qualifying year. And so that's when I really started transitioning away from the high volume program back into a sprint program. And then of course, all this was culminating towards the eventual 2020, Olympic team trials, which are our domestic selection, but also Pan Am championships, which are used as a continental selection for the Olympic Games. Unfortunately, leading into the 2020 competition season, things were going really, really well for me. I was setting, personal records in off the water and on the water, and I was very hopeful. I thought I was doing everything I needed to do, and I was I put myself in a place that I had never been before, and I was very excited for what that season was going to look like for me. And we were 3 weeks away from the Olympic team trials, which would select the domestic competitor, the domestic person who would then try and compete for the lane to go to the Olympics. We were 3 weeks away from that process from starting, and the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, and so we had to immediately come home and quarantine, and so that ended our season prematurely. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we are now.
I mean, now that you've kind of gotten to sort of your path, I feel like I kind of know the answer a bit about this, but I'd love to hear your interpretation on this. But like, do you think participating kind of judo and paddling at the same time up till about the age of 16, do you think it influenced kind of you as an athlete, and do you think it's made any differences or even improvements in your canoe kayak game?
I think so in a big way, because I mean, you would speak to this more than I could, but doing judo at a young age, I think is awesome, because it's, you have to be very aware of your surroundings and, balance and things like that. And so I think that's a really cool thing, really good thing to do as a young kid developing. But the other thing too is that I remember, there really isn't anything more intimidating than getting on the mats or the tatami before competition, because you're literally about to go, fight another person. And that is something that it makes you a little less afraid of competition when it's just a race.
Yeah.
There's no real risk of injury when you're, I mean, obviously there is, but not to the same extent as when you're about to go fight a person. So
I was going to say, there's a little less risk of someone injuring you on the water.
Right. I mean, no one, it's not full contact sprint kayak. So.
Yeah. So it's funny because, you hear about the bests in the world, like the Wayne Gretzky's, the Tiger Woods and stuff. And, from the age of 4, they were, practicing. And it's funny because I guess it goes back to that sort of when people see these people on some special sports supplements and, good genetics, not to downplay the amount of work that goes in, because you can't just take special sports supplements and sit on the couch and eat potato chips and get jacked and perform well in sport, right? You have to still put some insane amount of works in, regardless of the hand you were dealt. But I mean, I think it's really good to show that, more times than not, you hear it's nice for media to sensationalize these, they've been working since they were 4 years old. But more times than not, that results in burnout and people just leaving the sport by the time they're 14, 15, they've had a 10-year career in a sport already. Like, their bodies are breaking down and stuff, because I mean, there's a lot of old school coaching and training mentality that's trickled down because people aren't, continuing to further their education and looking at kind of new, evidence-based trends coming out. But like, there's really something to be said about having a multi-sport base well into your teenage years, right? One, it's like you kind of said, that judo game, it gave you that kind of competition side, but also a sport like that, anytime you have to move your body weight, so like a combat sport, a gymnastic sport, right? If you can control your body in space, oh man, you can control your body while holding equipment in space, because you're even more stable, right? You can control, right? Like,
I think that's very true. Yeah.
There's something to be said about being a multi-sport athlete. And now there obviously is some exceptions, because there's more than just, what the research says. There's kind of psychological factors that go into it. There's enjoyment of sports too. And maybe if, and self-efficacy plays a role. Like, if you're not good at anything else but paddling, well, okay, you're probably going to paddle for the rest of your life, right? That's just how it is, right? And there's an enjoyment factor to that as well. But I mean, generally speaking, like, being a multi-sport athlete well into your teenage years, and I mean until about 16 or 18, it seems, from talking to a friend of mine who actually did his master's in specifically combat sport kind of long-term athlete developments and looking at the pathways to get to, high performance, that more times than not, it's much more beneficial to avoid overuse injuries, burnout, to just be a better, well-rounded athlete and really just a person, because there's different kind of character growth that comes in different sports, whether it's an individual sport, a team sport, a combat sport, a race sport, right? There's something to be said about, having a multi-sport background to make you a more well-rounded athlete. I mean, I think that can kind of go back to the preparation and opportunity equals success, right? Like, that preparation side of things, you don't realize it, but since the age of 8 where you were playing soccer, hockey, judo, whatever, doing 3 or 4 sports and eventually slowly starting to focus on a couple and then one, those foundations kind of last with you through your entire life and just make you a better athlete.
Yeah, I think I agree with that totally. I can't speak as much to the kinetics or the physiological side of things, but I think also from just a mental standpoint, if you're a young kid, the idea is to just, for sport, is to just have fun and to play. So, I never liked the fact that, well, I think it's just best to have many sports, and that way there's not one focus, one thing that means, all the world. It's just about a lot of different ways in which you have fun with friends. And then once you're older, in your teens, late teens, maybe, you start introducing some serious, focus to one or two things, and eventually to one thing, and those competitions as well.
Yeah, it's the long haul. It's not necessarily the candle burning brightest, because that one burns out the fastest.
Yeah, and I think we've all seen those athletes before.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And again, more times than not, you see that as opposed to the insane success story of the person who, started at 5 years old, doing it 7 days a week all the way till they were 16, 17, and their bodies start falling apart already.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So I guess moving on, you talked about a lot of stuff, talking about how even when you were the alternate, you were still training like you were the guy, like that was your spot. I'd love to hear you elaborate a little bit on what do you feel that you're doing to stand out and get ahead in your sport?
Yeah. So obviously, you touched on a lot of things. Like there are a lot of uncontrollables when it comes to sport in general. I mean, everyone's a little bit different, and they'll excel at, different things, but those are not really things that are in your control per se. So what are things in your control? I mean, you don't have to necessarily, you can train harder, but in addition to training harder, you can also just train smarter. So I try and have conversations with, we have specialists that work with us. We have our coach, we have our strength coach, but we also have, nutritionists and sports psychologists and stuff like that. And I try as much as possible. It's more difficult in COVID times, but I try as much as possible to talk with these people and not just talk about, what they think, but to go into the research with them and ask them to send me those papers and read it myself. And I think that way you just get a bit more informed about what it is that's happening, and you can kind of have a bit of a discussion as opposed to just, take what they say or do what they say. And there's a bit of a back and forth. And I think you can better understand why they're asking you to do a certain thing. And if you have a better understanding, then you might be able to implement the treatment better. If the idea is to rest, well, is rest playing video games? Maybe not, because maybe that's actually quite stressful.
Yes.
So just having that basic understanding, I think, and as well as having a scientific background, I'm a science student at St. Mary's. I think that allows me to stand out a little bit better, a little bit more, and to take a bit more responsibility of my training into my own hands.
Two things from that. The first, I love that you said sometimes you gotta work smarter, not harder, because a lot of athletes, especially, and a lot of people as well in kind of the fitness world, like bodybuilders, powerlifters, and stuff, they're masochists. They love to punish themselves. If they're not crawling out of the gym, if you can barely get out of your boat, a lot of people have that mentality of like, that's a good workout, right? If I'm not sore, that's not a good workout. But that's not necessarily true, especially, as far as kind of the theory of periodization, right? Slowly progressing different variables like the volume of your training, the intensity of your training, and then also, having a periodized plan for your mental training, for your nutrition, right? What your weight maintenance is. There's a time and place to work till you're about to pass out, right? There's a time and place, because you need to know that limit. But if you're doing that every time, that old school kind of no pain, no gain mentality, well, it leads to a lot more pain than gain, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it works for some people, but certainly not for everyone. And I think, actually, I think it was you who was saying to me not that long ago that if you can get the same training stimulus with less fatigue, that's a better training treatment, right?
Oh, 100%. And kind of the second point from there, I love that as an athlete, sometimes you have to be selfish. Sometimes you have to be a little bit annoying because the squeaky wheel gets more grease, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a sign of a good coach, a good clinical professional, like a good PT, a good strength conditioning professional, if obviously you're not trying to be combative, but you should feel safe to go to them and say, why am I doing this? Maybe not in front of the whole team, maybe not interrupting a workout session or a practice session, but when they sit you down and say, here's your plan, say, okay, but why would you have me doing it here? Because, maybe I did this differently last time, or, hey, I actually read something that, something like this might be better. So why would you prescribe me this, or why would you assign me this kind of training, right? Like, I think athletes, there is that kind of authority role of their coaches or their trainers, right? That it almost gets a little intimidating, but the athletes kind of really need to take their own care into their own hands, because no one knows what you're feeling, what's going on inside your body, as far as fatigue, or how rested you're feeling, or how mentally drained you're feeling, or lack thereof. No one knows that better than you.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, like, the coaches and all these IST and stuff, they feel like these huge authority figures, and it's hard to stand up to them or whatever. But it's not necessarily even it's not being rude or being combative or anything like that. It's just helping you understand what it is that they're asking you to do. And of course, these people are experts in sport and in what it is that they do, but you're the expert in you. And not only that, but I mean, these people are all stakeholders in ensuring that the program is successful, but you're a stakeholder in yourself. You want yourself to be successful. So it's important that you, obviously, politely have those private conversations and just say, like, hey, like, I feel this way, like, what can we do? I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, it's all about being honest with yourself and that open communication with your training staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just as we're kind of moving to an end here, because I know you have some pretty big things coming up, so we'll move to wrap this up kind of soon. But I guess next question, we've been asking this to everyone, but how has COVID sort of affected you, your training, your goals within or outside of the sport?
Yeah, wow. I mean, it's been, obviously, for everyone on this planet, it's been huge. For us, as I was saying, we were a few weeks out from our Olympic team trials, and then all of a sudden it was just like the cord got pulled, and we were told it was like a Friday. We had a team meeting, and our team leader, I guess I'll call him, he says we had a team meeting on a Friday, and he said, like, it's okay, everything's good, we're safe here. And then it was like the next day or the day after that, and we had another team call, and he said, okay, whatever flights you have booked, cancel them and get on a flight like tomorrow or the day after, like as soon as possible, get home. And so that's what we did. It was just all of a sudden the cord got pulled, and we had to go back home to quarantine. And that was a huge change, obviously, for everyone. And when you're about to compete for, mentally I was prepared to compete for like the ultimate goal that I've been pursuing for, past 8 years. So it was pretty brutal to go from those final preparations to absolutely nothing. You're stuck in your apartment, and what can you do? And what is there even to do? Because what's going to happen with the Olympics? And so I tried to focus on just the day to day. When I find when the ultimate goal, the long-term goal becomes sort of cloudy, it's just important to focus on what you can do, now, even if you just set the bar really low and just do, I can't paddle when I'm in my apartment, but I can do push-ups, I can do sit-ups, just something. And that's sort of how I got through those first 2 weeks. And then ultimately we learned that the Olympics would be canceled this past summer in 2020, but that it would likely be hosted again the following year. And that was, that sort of changed the game, because this whole plan that I was talking to you about before, about this high volume program and then transition back to the sprint program before 2020, now we added another year onto that. And so it does sort of make you wonder about that whole 4-year approach now that it's a 5-year approach. But at least, everyone's in the same boat. Everyone has had to add an extra year onto their training program. So it's, it's been a pretty rough ride. And even still now, I mean, literally this morning, I don't know if you saw this, but in the CDC, there was an article where Dick Pound, who's the
used to be WADA.
He used to be WADA, now he's at IOC, but he was saying that he's uncertain that the 2021 Tokyo Games are going to go ahead now. And so you just, every day you see an article saying, oh yeah, it'll go ahead, or another article saying, well, I don't know, maybe not. And you just kind of have to, just roll with it. I mean, there's nothing you can really do except for focus on the day to day. And I think that's where I find myself, and I think probably a lot of other athletes find themselves, is it's weird having that ultimate goal still being uncertain. And the reality is if you can't stop training, because if it does happen, you won't be ready. So, but it's hard to push yourself as hard as you can when you don't really know what it is at the end of the tunnel, if there is an end of the tunnel, right? So it's been tricky, but I think that definitely the takeaway, the focus is to enjoy the journey, enjoy what's happening right now, focus on what's happening right now in the moment. And if you're having a bad day, sometimes it's just about setting the bar low and doing some simple things to snowball into some more complicated things.
I love your mentality of just sticking to the day to day. It kind of reminds me of something my dad used to tell me all the time when I was prepping for competitions for judo and wrestling. But he would always say, control what you can control, right? You can control your diet, right? If practice gets canceled because of further COVID restrictions, you can control that. You can still use whatever equipment you have around your house. There's so much body weight work you can do to stay in proper condition, so that as soon as you're back on the water, there might be a bit of rust, a bit of kind of getting back that technical aspect, but your physical conditioning is there, so you can maximize that. How soon you can get back to that technical proficiency, and then kind of train above that and make further adaptations.
That's exactly right. I mean, there's really nothing else you can do, but especially I like what you said about controlling your diet. I mean, that's the ultimate, like, obviously we know that a healthy diet is gonna lead to better performances, but it's just something, especially in lockdown, I think a lot of people, athletes or not, were able to like just get a sense of control over their selves, their environment, because you can control what you put in your body, even during lockdown. So I think that was a really big one, especially it was for me too.
That's awesome to hear that you've been being very proactive and still keeping yourself in top form in kind of every aspect that kind of comes together to make you as successful of an athlete as you are. I guess before we finish up here, is there any? I know you've got a pretty big weekend coming up, but is there any things you want to highlight? Any camps, programs, competitions that you want to or are at liberty to highlight, or any social media or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really honestly have anything to highlight. I would highlight my social media. My Instagram is AlexJScott_, and so that's where I post most of my stuff. If you want to follow me and see how I'm doing, and we're leaving this weekend to go to BC. The first time in a long time that the whole team is going to be together in one spot and able to train again during this pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. And so I'll be able to post every now and again on that account.
Right on. So go check Alex out on Instagram while he runs away from the snow just to get the rain out in BC.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for volunteering your time today to have this little conversation. I mean, I think there's so much from this people can take, and not just people pursuing, if they have an Olympic dream, but just the regular Joe Schmo who's trying to lose a couple pounds too. And that's kind of the goal of these segments, is try to find something for everybody. Just share some experiences, especially from people from the Maritime, to promote that. We've got some pretty amazing individuals involved in sport, in health, and everything else. So really, thank you so much for coming on today, and best of luck in your future endeavors in the sport of canoe kayak. We'll be looking out for I guess Tokyo 2021 or even maybe 2022 to see you on the podium there.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. It was a lot of fun doing this, and it was good to, sort of see you again, I guess, in this virtual environment. It's been a while.
I was going to say, last time I saw you, I think I was about 2 pitchers deep down at Freeman's. Before everything got shut back down again.
Nice, yeah. Maybe some other time, when the pandemic is all wrapped up, we can do that again.
Yeah, I'll drink you under the table any day.
I'm sure you would.
All right, Alex. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Take care.